All right, so here we are looking directly across to the chip shop pit, which we were at another visit in this series. And you can see that vein of rock goes down and down and down, and it goes into the Raging River. The Raging River is right below us, that section of trees. This is our buffer down there below this sail from the Raging River. 200 foot buffer, and it goes and goes and goes and eventually cuts underneath the power lines there, the BPA power lines. We're looking at right across the way there, the Cariston timber sale. The Raging bends around that, and then over on the other side of Cariston timber sale there that was cut a few years ago is Highway 18 that then cuts through Tiger Mountain, which is right in front of us here, Taylor Mountain over to our left, and the rest of our Raging block that goes south towards Enumclaw. And this was, again, like I said, just cut this last year. Again, you can see this is a good example here of how the stumps pop out so much. You can see that stump up by the road. Old growth, original, cut, first cut. There's a cedar stump down there. There's one down there, there and there. They're pretty few and far between, but they're there, and they're huge stumps. They're twice the size of these intermediate stumps, which you can see around here as well, that again are closer to the ground. They have a lot more decay in them. Most of them don't, again, seem to have much fire scar on them as the old growth stumps do, so that tells me that they're from different times, different forest practices, and just the sheer number of stumps too, because you can see the fresh cut ones now that we came in and cut. You know, it would have been too many trees per acre if you look at just the older stumps, the first two harvests. You know, back when this was first cut, when it was primeval original forest, you know, there were maybe 80 trees per acre, you know, probably no more than 100. But the second rotation, you're looking at probably closer to 150 trees per acre or so. And now what we get is more like 250 trees per acre, or, you know, in the low 200s. So a little more forest forensic there for you, and a good view of this rock pit. I think you can hear the Raging hopefully down there. And you can see that kind of black, darkish coal type material, highly weathered. And then it actually, it looks like it gets better the deeper you go, which could be potential because the basalt could be a harder and better material there. You can also see there's a cliff over there. In fact, that area was too steep. That's all rock outcropping, kind of where those trees that we left. And then there's a big leaf tree group up around a rock knob there. There's a leaf tree group there and a leaf tree group there. You can see, again, you can see the clusters of leaf tree groups that we've left. There's one big one on top of the pit here, and another one behind it, and another one even. All right, so here, just a little quick stop here from our last stop on the same road in the sweet tea sale. And this is a borrow source that we were directly on top of over that ridge there in that played out pit that we saw that had all kinds of interesting sedimentary rock and stuff in it, as well as some basalt. And then here we are, the chip shop pit again that we were looking at just before. And you can imagine this vein of basalt here, you know, back when the earth and the crust here was volcanic, and it could have been when the Raging River was up here. And imagine the Raging River cutting through this material over time. And and then having landslides and you know, rebuilding of the soil, rebuilding of vegetation on its banks, creating more and more soil, more and more stability. But it's interesting to see even across, you know, a major river like the Raging is, where it is down there now. You can hear it. It's a pretty large river. And then how we have this vein of basalt that's come all the way up through here. And it may even be associated with the Rattlesnake mainline pit that we looked at previously. And I'll just also point out here where, you know, we've got water draining here. It hasn't rained very much recently, but we have water coming out of there because it's hitting, you know, water is hitting an impervious surface, this rock pit here, and then it's you know, it's doesn't have anywhere to go. And so again, having great ditches that can take care of this water, super important. I just noticed over here too, this may end up going a little longer than I anticipated, but because we have over here this highly sedimentary rock that's all gray. It's very sandy, gritty sandstone, and they've set it aside here because it's not very good material. It's got some of that dark coal type veins. You can see at the bottom of this here, you've got a vein of it there as well. And if you look over at the chip shop pit, you know, almost even the same elevation, basically, we're experiencing that same dark material. Probably some old carbon that was laid down there in, you know, maybe a flood or something, you know, an ancient flood. And then also I just want to point out here how the basalt tends to have this, you know, 45-degree angle cracks to it, almost like it was laid down, or, you know, protrudes through you know, whatever material it came up as it came up as lava, and then potentially, you know, cooling during different volcanic events, or potentially, you know, and then having some, you know, sediment material laid on top of it from the creek activity, and then another layer. You know, there's a whole story here to be told that, you know, one of the reasons why I like soils is the geology of it, but I'm not a professional geologist by any means, but I do have a love for geology and wish I knew more about it. It's something that I'm inspired to study more about. It would be great to be able to tell the story of time here, but this is basically a window into it, and as well as soils. So cool little rock formations across a major river that are obviously connected. Okie dokie, we're just down the road a little bit from where we were by that borrow source, looking over at the chip shop pit over there. You can see the the bottom end of this one unit of the Matchstick sail that was just cut this past winter. And again, the nice big leaf tree clumps that we've left there as habitat islands. And if we look down here, you can see, again, I know I'm belaboring this point, but this is a great example of, you know, planting the fourth rotation of trees here, basically, which we're just now starting to cycle into as an industry. You got these big old stumps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you've got these intermediate stumps. There's one there, there's one in front of me here. Actually, no, that's an old one because you can see the fire scars on it. It's just been broken apart. There's one over there, but here it's very clear. We have a huge old stump, a huge old stump there. Both of these have fire scars on them. And then we have this intermediate stump here. and this one right here that's just hanging on the road there. No fire scars. Cut closer to the ground, much smaller. And so you've got first rotation, original forest, second rotation. The third rotation are these stumps that you can see were just cut almost to the ground. And we're now gonna do vegetation control on this because we had a ton of vine maple in here too. And so hopefully we'll be able to knock the vine maple back and give the Douglas fir and cedar that we plant in here a chance to establish. This is a pretty impressive road cut. It's nice and tall. It's pretty vertical, which is helpful. This is probably a little steeper than that, 1-to-1 ratio of a road cut that we're looking for. But we also had to kind of squeeze this road into a narrow area here. I couldn't climb up there to drop my soil tape, but I can tell you from the top, it's probably 3 meters, 4 meters deep at least. So we're looking at 12-15 feet here of a nice soil profile of glacial material. What I'm noticing here are there less large rounded rock. You're getting a lot more smaller pebbles. We're getting closer to the raging river. So you can imagine this is probably starting to get into areas where finer sediments and finer material were laid down over time. And so this is, essentially, imagine looking into an old lake bed or an old river channel. And, here we are millions of years into it at this horizon, or this layer here, where that was put down. And then you see there's some material in here that is highly weathered, but still it's compacted glacial till. It's made up of sediment, sands and silts from the ancient river, and then cemented in here, pebbles and cobbles, and you have a layer of it. It's starting to break apart here, but water is definitely not percolating through that very easily. And you can see, there's just kind of a layer of it here, and that probably goes hundreds of feet that way and hundreds of feet that way. Who knows? Again, I'll point out the O and A horizon here. Pretty typical. Again, this is similar to what we were seeing there as far as glacial influences, except what I want to point out is that these glacial influences, like here, the rocks are smaller again. We're also getting more fine sediments than we had back at that original hole or road cut that we looked at, where we were about 400 feet higher in elevation. And so just I'm trying to point out here, the closer we get to the river bottom here, the more material we're going to find that like this compacted glacial till lens that's in here, and that's been formed by glaciers and the stream, or ancient glacial river influences of the raging river, when at one point in time, at one day, it was ice was up to here and above us, and then the river was actually probably up to here at some point, laying down this material.